If you are familiar with the comments in my other videos, you'll have noticed that literally every other comment is a request for me to do a list of the top 10 tracks by Deathspell Omega. Give the people what they want is a motto that I definitely disagree with. Nevertheless, here we are. It's possible that some people will think it's blasphemous to take these songs out of the context of their respective albums because they are carefully constructed pieces of perfect art. My counter-argument to this very valid point is tradition dictates that a rundown always starts at the back end and works its way up to number 1. So at number 1, it's the Shrine of Mad Laughter from the 4th full-length Onward Sinner in Agnem Maledicti Hellfire. Straight in with ingenious chaotic clattery that twists and skews and squalls like nothing else on this planet. Immediately you think if it's an unsurpassable high point, that is until approximately 4 minutes later when a passage of literal magic emerges from the silence to take your breath away all over again and leave you drooling like a goddamn The apex has been reached, not just for Faz, but for the whole DSO discography generally. In the words of Friedrich Nietzsche, you cannot be serious. Perhaps controversially, in at number 2 we have Scorpions and Drought from the Drought EP. Everything you ever loved about Deathspell Omega condensed into 3 minutes of lethally focused magnificence and captured with a razor-sharp production job. I encourage everybody to experience this on headphones. You can pick up the obscene amount of detail that goes into a DSO recording, especially the vocal lines. The drum track alone will give you a hardy smile. I also encourage people to learn the words because this track is endlessly enjoyable to rasp along to, although Mikko doesn't really work at a pitch that I'm comfortable with. In fact, let me just try a couple of lines here. Actually, I'm not going to do that, let's just move on. Canosa was the first DSO record I picked up and I was on board before they even put the CD in the player. The packaging is exquisite and the lyrics are bewildering. In fact, a quick word on the lyrics. Unless I've gone to the trouble of learning a song's lyrics so I can yap along to them during my morning commute, I don't study lyrics, but I do recognise that they have a big effect on the way I feel about an album. If they are illiterate or just a second-rate rip-off of what another band's been doing, I will be conscious of this while I'm listening, so the amount of effort that goes into DSO's lyrics increases a subconscious message that a lot of work has gone into this valuable piece of art, which I greatly appreciate even if I don't really have any idea what they're talking about, because I'm not a religious scholar. In any case, Kénôse II is the delirious centrepiece to this astonishing triptych and ends on a massive adrenaline rush before track 3 picks up the baton and winds it all down. Just a phenomenal release. Indeed, I think it was Baruch Spinoza who said, "If I had been drinking out of the toilet, I might have been killed." Number 4, Chaining the Katechon. Now, I'm not such a hack that I would describe a track as a journey, but this track is a journey that comes in hot and jumps backwards and forwards between extreme dissonance and subtly tragic melodies for just over 20 minutes. At that length, it could easily feel like a pile of abrasive riffs haphazardly thrown together without any particular care for coherence. But this track really does flow beautifully and has a central driving riff that keeps the narrative together with ease. And there's a passage about halfway through that's as jarring and enjoyably discordant as anything else in the catalogue. Number 5, and actually for those of you who are paying attention, the 4th that comes from an EP rather than a full length. It's Internecine Iatrogenesis. I'm going to go ahead and say the Synarchy of Molten Bones is the best EP in the catalogue, which is pretty amazing considering they've been making music for well over a decade and their discog is literally heaving with sublime records. Every track on the EP is amazing, but this one has a slightly different sound and feel to the others, perhaps because the lead riff is atypically isolated. The track is lively enough for the first minute and a half, but then hits total chaos and is happy to sit there pretty much until the end of the disc. It's like an endurance test for how much mind-bending genius you can consume in one breath. Indeed, I think it was Dostoevsky who said, 37? At number 6 in the list, I'm entering a track from the Monvmentvm requires Circvmspice, Sola Fide 2. My thoughts on the album? Well, I appreciate the ambition and the concept and understand why somebody might nail themselves to this record, but I think it's too long. It's probably not a coincidence that the songs I've brought in here so far are mostly from EPs. I think Deathspell are at their best when their attack is focused, and there are several tracks on SMRC that I can live without. Of course there are some brilliant moments too, and for me Sola Fide 2 is a standout. The riffs are a lot more straightforward than some of their late work, and the denouement is flat out rock music, and I love it. I think the noted scholar Alan Partridge would describe it as lovely stuff. On balance, I think Paracletus is their best full length to date. The collection of shorter songs really suits them and makes the album feel more focused and complete, and actually more satisfying. It's also their most accessible album, even though the music is frequently as demanding as much of their other work. The feeling of accessibility is perhaps a psychological trick performed by the relatively straightforward intro and the gorgeous final track, which I'll come back to later. I didn't realise how much I loved Devouring Famine until many spins had been enjoyed, largely because Wings of Predation and Abscission are so strong that the album initially felt front-loaded. This is another example of dense chaos that is particularly enjoyable on headphones, so you can really get lost in the universe and notice the detail in the guitar work. So Devouring Famine occupies the 7th position. In my mind, Massgrave Aesthetics and Chaining the Katechon are almost sister releases, two 20-minute works of devastating brilliance that need their own space to breathe, like masterful paintings that require their own wall where they can be absorbed and admired alone and undisturbed. Massgrave Aesthetics is a true epic that draws you into a world rich with an atmosphere that is almost religious in scope. In fact, it feels like it was recorded in a gigantic cathedral as part of an unclean ritual, whereas Chaining the Katechon was more like an attack. There's very little to pick between these two in quality, but MGA is my number act, if you'll permit what Larry David might call the two form. At number 9, I'm slotting in the title track from the Monvmentvm, because Circvmspice. Might have to edit that out. This is a hard, muscular track that acts as a worthy centrepiece to this epic yet flawed, according to my calculations, masterwork. There are some great riffs in there and a moment of unsettling tension before an extended grinding finish which finds Mikko yelling his mantra like a possessed priest, possibly while hanging upside down from the rafters. An image which of course brings to mind Thomas Sowell's famous quote, "People who enjoy meetings should not be in charge of anything." And finally number 10, Apokotastasis. Apokotastasis? It feels like too many syllables. Apokotastasis Panton, the transcendent closer to the band's finest album, says I, is also the perfect way to round off this important and definitive list. I don't think there's another track like this in the catalogue, except the one 3 tracks earlier on the same album. There's grace and elegant melancholy to the central riff, and the sheets of guitar that are piled on top of it make this feel more like a piece of post-rock than the band's usual mode of transgressive black metal. In fact, I wonder if it reminds me of Sigur Rós at one point. Either way, another breathtaking track from a genuinely special band. Apokotastasis Panton is my number 10. I hope this clip has been educational. Thank you for listening.